And we're back. Okay, here I'm on the Python class page under 9.1 or graphical user interfaces. This just talks about the different elements of a graphical user interface. The names are important. Different operating systems, different libraries may call some of these elements by a little bit different names, but not too much. Those are pretty much the standard. Okay, so let's get into PyQt. PyQt is a toolkit that's provided by the Qt company. It was originally done for C++, but they ported it over to Python, and it's definitely my favorite for building graphical user interfaces. In other words, there isn't a graphical user interface built into Python. We have to run a library. There is an old one called tkinter that used to be the standard, but it's really dated, and this one not only I think is much easier to use once you're used to it, but it also makes much better looking applications, modern looking software applications. So to get started, I'm just going to copy this first block of code. Okay. I'm going to paste it in, and you'll see that we import sys, and then we import some things from the PyQt5 library, including widgets. PyQt refers to user interface controls, all these different items, the menus, the tools, the buttons, as widgets. So it's like you're making a machine with widgets on it. That's fairly popular terminology. Now, my main code down here actually got tabbed in. Don't know why. I'm going to have to go fix that. But then we have a class definition. I'm going to come back to that. And down here we create a class, and then we call the application to run that class. Exist means to run. Now, you don't have to worry about these 3 lines of code actually. All you have to do is hit run, whoops, and you'll see that it brings up a little window. Yay! Look, we made a window. Okay, so again, copy and paste that code, hit run, you should get a little tiny window. If you don't, there's probably an issue with having Qt installed. And I would go and check and make sure it's installed correctly. For some reason, Wing just decided to miniaturize itself. That will happen some when you're doing GUI development. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about these 3 lines of code. I just copied them off of the tutorials that I'll point you to later. Okay, and we do have to worry a little bit about some of these lines. So this is a class definition. This is the first time I think you've defined a class in Python. You've used classes over and over again. Wherever you see something dot, like string dot, or something else dot, one of the libraries dot, you've actually been talking to what's called an object, and all objects come from classes. I'm going to have to pause now because my dog is scratching at and I'm back. Okay, so here's our class. Notice it's not def, it's class. And then space and the name of our class, which can be anything you want to call it as long as it's not another Python reserved word. And then we're passing in QWidget. And then in here we have our initialization function. So notice that really you can just think of classes as grouping functions and variables together. So this function is defined inside this class. It becomes part of this class. Underscore underscore init, yes, those are 2 underscores. Init for initialization, and then 2 more underscores is how Python recognizes an initialization or a constructor function for a class. Super is the parent class, and so here we're calling the parent's initializer. We'll talk more about that later, don't have to worry too much about it. Then notice down here we do self dot. Whenever we create a class, we're then going to create multiple objects from it. In fact, that's what's happening here. When we call main dialog class, we're actually calling this function, and this will create an object from main dialog class. In other words, what that means is that this object, my dialog object, that comes from this class, will then have all the functions and variables that we define here within the class. Okay? Now, what we can do then is self points to the object we've created. So in this case, main dialog object, when this function is called, self will be the same as the contents of main dialog object. And then we can call functions in that, like set geometry. this sets X, Y, width, and height of where our dialog appears. So I can change this, hit run. Whoop, whoop, dialog's coming closer. Let's make it 400, 400 and see if I can get it to appear automatically in the area of our video. Oop, getting closer. X does not appear to be moving very far. Let's just stick a 600 in there. Oh, there it is. Yay. And then we can make it bigger. Okay. And go ahead and play a little bit with that just so you get comfortable with the idea that this function is initializing our dialog box, okay, or our window. Then we can also set the title. To something you want to say, and oh look, it changes it up here. Cool, yeah, this is fun. You do have to call self.show because that actually displays the dialog box or the window. And I'm using those two terms interchangeably right now. I should mention that a window is typically any box like this where there's stuff in it. A dialog is one that comes up, asks you to do stuff in it, and then goes away when you're done. So a great example of dialog box would be this one. So I can't really do anything until I get rid of this dialog box, or I shouldn't do anything until I get rid of it. And dialog boxes often have OK and cancel in them. Not a huge difference, but okay, so hopefully this is fairly easy. You can play around with it, have some fun, but it's also kind of boring. So let's add some more stuff to it. I'm going back to the web page and you'll see that there's information on adding layouts. Now there's two ways to position items when you add them. Well, let me add something first. Alright, so I'm going to add a layout and you will see when we run that appears to do nothing. Okay, not very exciting yet. Then I'm going to add a button to my dialog. Okay, and notice that we've created a layout. It's called a box layout. That's our main layout, and then we set it into the window. Then I've created a push button, okay, and I've added a widget to my layout. Basically what all that means is we've added a button. Now hidden here we've also created a layout, and notice if I change the size of this window, the button is the full width of the window, which is probably not what you're looking for. But we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, for right now, let's have some fun just adding a bunch of other stuff. Like here's a checkbox. We can add that in. And there's a checkbox. Yay! And we can add in a label. A label is just a string. These are handy not only to add text like help hints to your dialog, okay, but also you could put a name and then you could put a value that someone has entered or a value you've calculated. Text edit boxes are very important. A number of you have asked me how do we get information from the user, and this is the main way to do it in a graphical user interface. So now I can type something here and we'll be able to pull that information back into our Python program. And right now I'm just adding a bunch of stuff because one of the things we need to look at is the layouts. So this layout is a box layout, and as you probably already noticed, this is not very usable because it will just keep adding things horizontally across here, which makes kind of unique, strange looking layouts. There's a lot of other options. You could spend a lot of time and energy working on layouts, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code that has these horizontal layouts. Notice it says QH box layout. Okay, these are two horizontal layout items, and I'm going to paste those in right after the main layout. Okay, so that's going to create two horizontal layouts. Now, before I do anything else, also notice this is a QH. I want to change that to a QV. So that's going to make a vertical, box layout. Okay, and then we're going to add into our main layout two horizontal ones. Then, instead of adding our widgets to our main layout, we're going to add them to our horizontal layouts, one or the other. Okay, now when we run, what you're going to find is, oh look, there's two horizontal layouts in our dialog box now. Okay, so there's two horizontal ones, one here, and then those two are combined into one vertical layout. So vertical going this box and then this one. Okay, so those two layouts, and they're organized vertically, and then the horizontal ones are organized, the contents of them horizontally. In other words, you can combine vertical and horizontal layouts to your heart's content to make a dialog look pretty good. Now when you go to produce a production piece of software, you may use this layout approach. However, most folks are going to go in and absolutely position each of the items. In other words, you're going to specify the X, Y, width, and height of every single item in there. Okay? And I'll mention that a little bit later. This is much easier right now to get you started and get a dialog up and running. And we're not too worried about you making a gorgeous dialog right now. Keep your dialogue simple for this assignment, and you'll be able to do them with just these horizontal and vertical layouts. Okay, so I'm at time, so I need to